Exodus chapter 3, starting at verse 1. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, why the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face, because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, What is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you.
All right, the second reading is, as Josh said, John chapter 8, verses 31. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, If you hold to my teaching, you are really my disciples. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. They answered him, We are Abraham's descendants, and have never been slaves to anyone. How can you say we should be set free? Jesus replied, Very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. I know you are Abraham's descendants, yet you are looking for a way to kill me, because you have no room for my word. I am telling you what I have seen in the Father's presence, and you are doing what you have heard from your father. Abraham is our father, they answered. If you were Abraham's children, said Jesus, then you would do what Abraham did. As it is, you are looking for a way to kill me, a man who has told you the truth that I heard from God. Abraham did not do such things. You are doing the work of your own father. We are not illegitimate children, they protested. The only father we have is God himself. Jesus said to them, If God were your father, you would love me, for I have come here from God. I have not come on my own. God sent me. Why is my language not clear to you? Because you are unable to hear what I say. You belong to your father, the devil, and you want to carry out your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, not holding to the truth, for there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks his native language, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Yet because I tell the truth, you do not believe me. Can any of you prove me guilty of sin? If I am telling the truth, why don't you believe me? Whoever belongs to God hears what God says. The reason you do not hear is that you do not belong to God." The Jews answered him, "Aren't we right in saying that you are a Samaritan and demon-possessed?" "I am not possessed by a demon," said Jesus, "but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. I am not seeking glory for myself, but there is one who seeks it, and he is the judge. Very truly I tell you, whoever obeys my word will never see death." At this they exclaimed, "Now we know that you are demon-possessed. Abraham died, and so did the prophets, yet you say that whoever obeys your word will never taste death. Are you greater than our father Abraham? He died, and so did the prophets. Who do you think you are?" Jesus replied, "If I glorify myself, my glory means nothing. My Father, whom you claim as your God, is the one who glorifies me. Though you do not know him, I know him. If I said I did not, I would be a liar like you, but I do know him and obey his word. Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad. You are not yet 50 years old," they said to him, "and you have seen Abraham?" "Very truly I tell you," Jesus answered, "before Abraham was born, I am." At this they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple grounds.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Ben. Hi, I'm Ian. I'm the pastor of the church family at Emmanuel Westbury. And just before I start, I wanted to remind you that if you have questions as we're going on, you can post those on Pigeonhole. I think we've got a slide there somewhere, Kate. And you can do that anonymously. Go to Pigeonhole, put in that code. And then after the sermon, we'll be able to work through some of those questions. One Saturday afternoon, you're walking down the high street, and suddenly, from around the corner, a man comes running towards you at full speed with a gun. What do you think? Then he shouts out, "Armed police, get out of the way." What he says about himself changes very much how you feel about him and how you relate to him. Or maybe it's a Wednesday evening, you're out mountain biking, you come round a corner, doesn't go well, and you come off and you feel your leg crack as you land, and you're rolling around on the floor in intense pain, and another mountain biker comes round the corner and gets off her bike, and she's coming towards you, and you're thinking, "Just don't touch me, stay away." And then she says, "Okay, I'm a doctor." What she says about herself changes the way you think about her. And I wonder, as you hear the name Jesus, how you react. Who do you think you're dealing with? Is he a moral figure who's just a good guide, shows us how to live? Is he a revolutionary figure to kind of inspire us to action? Maybe you believe in God, but the thing is, you're not quite sure what type of God you believe in. Is he really a God who cares? Is he a God who really wants the best for us? Is he a God who is actually relevant? Who is Jesus? And as Claire was saying, over the next 8 weeks, we are in a series of talks. And the big question is, and it's the question Jesus is going to answer, who is he? And we're looking at these 8 occasions in John's Gospel where Jesus gives us an answer by going, "I am, ... You might have heard what other people say about Jesus, but who does Jesus say Jesus is? That's where we're going. And we're going to dive straight into John chapter 8. And Jesus is very busy making some controversial claims. It's not just some politicians these days that do it. Look at verses 31 to 36, whether that's on your Bible or up on the screen. John chapter 8, 31 to 36. To the Jews who had believed him, Jesus said, "If you hold to my teaching, you're really my disciples. Then you'll know the truth, and the truth will set you free." They answered him, "We're Abraham's descendants. We've never been the slaves of anyone. How can you say that we shall be set free?" And Jesus says, "Very truly, I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now, a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to whatever. So if the son sets you free, you will be free indeed. You are slaves to sin," he says, "and I have come to set you free." I mean, that's a big thing to say. But there's more. Verse 51, Jesus goes on. "Very truly," he says, "whoever obeys my word will never see death." I'm not just here to set you free from sin. I am here to set you free from death itself. Now, the Jewish leaders hear this, and they're outraged, and they are suspicious. Okay? Who is this guy who is making these crazy claims? Who is he? Who are you? And actually, over the course of this long reading in John's Gospel, they ask this question basically 3 times. And we've got a slide there, Kate. In verse 25, just before today's reading, they actually go, "Who are you?" they asked. "Who are you?" Verse 33, they say, "How can you say we shall be set free?" The subtext is, who are you to say these kinds of things? Verse 53, "Who do you think you are?" So what is Jesus' response? What does he say about who he is? And what gives him the right to make these kinds of claims about freedom and slavery and life and death? Well, the heart of his answer is in verses 51 to 56. That's where we're going to kind of concentrate our time. 56 to 59. 56 to 59. And Jesus is speaking to the Jewish authorities, and he says this in verse 56. He says, "Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day. He saw it and was glad." "You're not yet 50 years old," they said to him. "And have you seen Abraham?" "Very truly I tell you," Jesus answered, "before Abraham was born, I am." At this, they picked up stones to stone him, but Jesus hid himself, slipping away from the temple and the grounds. Now, what was so controversial about what Jesus said here? Because the religious leaders, okay, they understand he has said something crazy because they are about to stone him. So what's going on? Well, in verse 56, Jesus is speaking about someone called Abraham. Now, super quick history lesson about Abraham. Abraham was considered, if you like, the founding father of the Jewish faith. In fact, the book of Genesis, which is the first book in our Bible, it tells Abraham's story. And it starts with God appearing to Abraham and making Abraham some incredible promises. God promises Abraham a family that will grow into a nation. And God promises Abraham land where that nation can kind of live and flourish. And God promises that through that nation, the whole world will be blessed. It was one of the defining moments for Jews, God's promises to Abraham. But the thing is, those promises, they happened 1,800 years before Jesus was born. So sort of we look back to Jesus. Imagine Jesus looking back again, roughly the same period of time. And yet here is Jesus, and he is saying, let me just tell you what was going on through Abraham's head and heart when God was making those promises to him. Verse 56, you see what Jesus says? He says, "Your father Abraham rejoiced at the thought of seeing my day, and he saw it and he was glad." And the Jews are really confused. Verse 57, "What are you talking about, Jesus? How can you claim to know what Abraham was feeling or looking forward to? That was 1800 years ago, and you're barely an old man. What are you talking about? And this is where Jesus drops his bomb, and this is where the Jewish leaders go mad. Verse 58. Very truly I tell you, Jesus answered, before Abraham was born, I am. Now again, what is so provocative about that? Well, it's this. I am is the name that God gave himself in the Old Testament. And to put it simply, Jesus is putting himself on par with God. He is claiming to be God. And that's why the hearers tried to stone him, because they considered it blasphemy. And I want you to see that I'm not just making that up. And to do that, we need to go back to the book of Exodus, which Josh read to us. So if you could just flick back with me, that'd be great. Can I keep your finger in Josh? I know there's a little bit of... keep your finger in John, because we'll go back to it in Exodus. Now, here's the backstory. Abraham's family, do you remember God made the promise? Abraham's family has grown. They've grown into a nation called the Israelites, but they haven't yet got a land where they will flourish. Instead, they're actually in Egypt, living under Pharaoh's rule. Okay, so it's slavery. So that's the backdrop to Exodus chapter 3, when God introduces himself to this figure called Moses. Now, Moses wasn't expecting to meet God. It was just like an ordinary day shepherding, whatever that looks like. So when God speaks to him, Moses has kind of naturally got some questions. And the main question is, who are you? Who are you? Like, who am I dealing with here? And God responds, Exodus 3, verse 13 and 14. Let's go there. Let's start there. Moses said to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you, and they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? In other words, who are you? Verse 14, God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Now, biblical names are often quite popular for kids, aren't they? Last time I checked, I am hasn't even made it into the top 100. Okay? So why does God call himself I am? And this is where the burning bush comes into it. Because that was actually how God first got Moses' attention. So Exodus, let's stick there, chapter 3, verses 1 to 4. Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There, the angel of the Lord, that's another way of describing God, appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that the bush was on fire, but did not burn up. So Moses thought, I'll go over and see the strange sight. Why the bush does not burn up? When the Lord saw that he'd gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush. And it's at that point that God introduces himself to Moses and says, I am. Now, this bush on fire, the strange thing about it is that it was burning without burning up. It was burning without burning up. So I've got a little candle here to kind of help us understand this. Just need to... This is going to be awkward if I can't light it. Okay. Just think about how the candle works, okay, for a minute. For that flame to keep burning, it has to burn up the wax, okay, because the wax is the fuel. No fuel, no flame. That's how sort of fire works. It burns by burning up. But that is not what was going on in Exodus chapter 3 with the burning bush. This bush is burning, but the wood isn't burning up. So unlike our candle here, the burning bush flame doesn't need fuel. It's not burning the wood, it's just burning. In other words, it's totally self-sufficient. The flame is self-sufficient. It doesn't need the fuel. It's totally independent. And I think that helps us understand what God means when he calls himself I am. He is the self-sufficient God who is reliant on no one and nothing. It burns, but it doesn't burn up. He doesn't depend on anything. And that is very unlike us, isn't it? Kate, maybe we can get that second slide up. Just think of Maslow's pyramid of needs. We're all needy. We've got the physiological needs, don't we? We need water, we need food, we need air, we get hangry, okay? We need safety, so there's kind of shelter and warmth. We've got social needs. We need friendship. We need kind of community. We want others' esteem. And there's kind of self-actualization. We want purpose. We want to know when we wake up in the morning, what are we doing? In other words, we're just a very needy bunch. We rely on other things or other people, other places. We rely on those things to keep going. And the poet John Donne, he got it spot on when he wrote, "No man is an island." We don't just exist unto ourselves. We're needy. We need other things. That's just who we are. It's not a good or bad thing per se. It's just, that is the human condition, isn't it? But that is not true of God. He needs no one. And he needs nothing. He is totally self-sufficient. And because he's totally self-sufficient, he is unchanging. Okay? So think about it. We needed our parents, spoiler alert, we needed our parents to have sex so that we could have a beginning. But not God. God has no beginning. Nothing caused God. And unlike us, God doesn't need anything to keep going. He's not dependent on anything. And because he's not dependent on anything to keep going, he can keep going forever. He has no end. Nothing caused him. He's always existed. Nothing sustains him, he doesn't need it, and so he has no ending. He just unchangeably is. Which is why when Moses says to him, "Who are you?" and the flame is burning, but the bush is not burning up, he just says, "I am who I am." That is God's name to Moses. In the Old Testament, that's who God said he was. Now, you know, some people, they go, well, if you read the New Testament, Jesus never claimed to be God. He never claimed to be God. Don't say he's God. Well, you tell that to the Jewish leaders in verse 59. When Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am, they go absolutely ballistic because they understand that the 30-year-old Palestinian man standing in front of them is claiming to be God. And they can't get their heads around it. And actually, that is one of the great and mysterious and unique ideas of Christianity, that Jesus is both fully man and fully God at the same time. He is the self-sufficient I am who never changes. Now, how is this at all relevant? Well, I think it's a challenge for us because if we're honest, don't we sometimes try to change Jesus? Don't we try and make Jesus fit into our mold? Don't we want Jesus to fit into our culture's mold of what's acceptable? So we might say, look, as long as a relationship is loving and consensual, Jesus would have no problem with it. As if somehow Jesus needs to conform to what our culture deems is acceptable in our little part of the world, at our particular time of life. And when that cultural moment changes, as it always does, cultural values always change. When they change, Jesus will need to change too. So we need to upgrade our idea of who Jesus was, a bit like the way we upgrade our phones. But Jesus here is saying, he's like, I am the unchanging God. Which means his views and his priorities and his loves and his hates, they don't change. Jesus does not rely on the latest cultural thinking to inform him as to what he should care about. But I think, there are other more subtle ways in which we fit Jesus into our molds. Maybe you've come to university, you're keen to make the most of life, sport, studies, socializing, and yes, you're a Christian, but you'll fit Jesus around those things. He can be a Sunday Jesus. And if that is you, whether it's to do with fitting Jesus around university, or around your work, or around your relationships, can I just be really clear with you from John 8 that Jesus is not your wingman? Jesus has not come to university to fit into your schedule. He is not interested in fitting around your career aspirations. He is not someone you can put in your pocket. He is not your wingman. He is your God. That is the first point. Who is Jesus? He is the self-sufficient, unchanging God. Now, I wonder how you react to that. You might be thinking, that is kind of a toxic portrait of Jesus. He's this kind of apex male who sort of doesn't need anyone and just exists in like a clinical, cold way. And we kind of met those people, and they are not nice people. And if Christianity is meant to be about good news, I'm not kind of sure I want that, frankly. And if that is you, here is the second point. Who is Jesus? He is the God who is totally committed to his people. So let's go back to that reading in Exodus chapter 3, if you could kind of flick back there. When God called himself I am, what else was he saying to his people at the time? In other words, here I am, okay, but what do you care about? Who is this I am? Let's have a look at Exodus chapter 3, verses 7 to 8. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. So with one breath, he says, I am. And with another breath, he is promising to rescue his people from slavery and to deliver them into a land of abundance. That's how he expresses his I amness. He is not like some distant, cold alpha male figure. He is a rescuing God who uses his self-sufficiency and unchangingness to release slaves, and to give people homes where they can flourish. Those are his priorities. And here's the cool thing, because this is exactly what we see from Jesus in John 8, and it is absolutely no coincidence. Jesus is the I am God, and what does he do? Go back to John chapter 8. What is he talking about in verses 31 onwards? He's talking about slavery. Exactly the same stuff. And what does he say? Verses 34 to 36. Jesus replied, "Very truly I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin. Now a slave has no permanent place in the family, but a son belongs to it forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." Jesus has come to bring freedom from slavery. It's exactly the same thing. Only he's not offering freedom from kind of Egypt or Rome. It's not a political or economic freedom he's offering. He's come to free everyone from of like a kind of internal slavery, a slavery to sin. See, Christianity's claim is the human condition is that we are all slaves. We are all slaves to our kind of own internal passions and desires. Some of those passions and desires are good, but some aren't. And you'll know how they lead you to hurt others. But worst of all, they lead us to kind of rebel against God. And here's the thing. Here is Jesus, okay? He is claiming to be God. He is the very one we have rebelled against. And he is not wagging his finger and looking to crush the rebellion. He is saying, I have come to set you free. And I've not just come to set you free from sin. He's also promising to set us free from death itself. Verse 51. This was the other big claim he made, which drove the religious authorities nuts. He says, "Very truly I tell you, whoever obeys my word will never see death." Now, we're going to think much more about this kind of promise of kind of life beyond death over the next few weeks. But for today, just breathe this in. Jesus, who is the self-sufficient and unchanging God, who is not like us, who does not need us, who could exist for eternity without us, against whom we have rebelled, rather than keeping his distance, he is offering hope of freedom from slavery and a life beyond death in a place that is spacious and good. Here's the big point. If you've tuned out the past few minutes, Jesus, this I am God, is unlimitedly good and committed to his people. Now, how does this help us today? What's the cash value? Let's use a bit of giant Jenga to think about this. You could build your life on a well-paying job that gives you financial security. You could build your life on five-a-side football that just gives you good well-being, keeps you happy. You could build your life on friendships that make you happy. Those would be good things to build your life on. But here's the thing. Each of these things that you kind of build your life on, they all rely on something else. Okay? In other words, they're not sort of self-sufficient. There's always a layer below them to keep them going, if that makes sense. Okay? So, the well-paying job gives you security so long as your employer is viable. But that is not guaranteed. The five-a-side football does give you mental well-being. Obviously, we know that sport has this effect on people, but that stops when you snap your Achilles. And friendships are brilliant. We are born to be in community, but what happens when your best friend gets a call from a doctor and it's bad news? The trouble is, if you build your life on things that are not self-sufficient, on things which can change, if you build your life on things which are not in your control to keep exactly the same, if they are the foundation to your life, you leave yourself vulnerable, because if and when they fall, you get the point. But if you build your life on Jesus, if you entrust him with your today and your tomorrow, then you are leaning on the one who leans on no one. You are depending on the one who depends on no one. He is solid, and therefore when you lean on him, there is no safer place to be. Now, I just want to be clear, this is not a promise that life with Jesus is all roses and rainbows, okay? But it is a promise that when the storms hit, that the all-sufficient and unchanging one has you. And this helps us in two particular areas, okay? We'll think about life's storms and our sin. Let's think about life's storms. In the past weeks, some of you will have gone through some lows. Maybe the first few days of university have been just really disappointing. Maybe parenting frustrations have brought you to tears. Maybe your mental health has been crippling you. And if that is you, then remember that Jesus has not changed. He is still wise. He is still in control. He is still caring. He is totally committed to you. He is unchanging. And he is all-sufficient. So in your storms, whatever they are, I am sure you're wobbling. Of course you are. So lean on Jesus. Lean on him rather than other things, because he leans on no one. And he will not give way. And his plans for you can't be blown off course by even a breath. What about our sin? How does this truth about Jesus help us with our sin? Could be over the summer holidays. Some of you will have messed up. You would have hurt yourself. You would have hurt others, friends, neighbors, colleagues. And you've been doing so well up until that point. And now you kind of look back over the past few weeks and there's guilt and there's shame and there's disappointment. And if that is you, then you also need to remember that Jesus has not changed. He is still gentle. He is still kind. He is still patient. He is still forgiving. He is still totally committed to you. Here is a great truth. Your sin against Jesus has not changed his love for you, because he is unchanging. And he is also the self-sufficient one. Here's another great truth. Jesus' love for you is not dependent on your love for him. Can we just take that in a minute? Jesus' love for you is not dependent on your love for him. He doesn't need your love. He doesn't show you love because you've shown it to him. He just shows you love. And so when you sin, when you fail, his love for you just keeps on going, unchangingly. Whether it's the storms of life, whether it's the sin in your life, Jesus is unchanging and he is self-sufficient. And he is totally committed to his people. He is the great I am. And we'll be thinking more in the weeks ahead about the different ways in which he is enough, in which he is everything we need, in which if we come to him, there is no safer place we could be. Let me pray. The writer to the Hebrew Christians wrote this: Jesus, the same, yesterday, today, and forevermore. And Father, we thank you that that is true, that our Saviour, when we are up and down and in and out, he is the same. And that his commitment to us never changes. And that when we fail him, he will not fail us. Forgive us when we try to remake him into something else. Amen.
Seat, and Ian, do come and join me. So, just in the interest of time, we'll probably just headlines on some of these questions that we've got. First couple of questions are really ones of clarity. First is there significance in that I am is written in capitals in Exodus and not in John?
Good question. Alan Hamlin is going to be getting himself ready because he is our Old Testament scholar. And he might totally contradict what I say, in which case that's fine because he knows more than what I'm saying. But all I'm just going to say is I think in the original Hebrew it was like that. And in the Greek text, as they translated it, it wasn't a capitalization. I don't know, Alan, do you want to...
It's being rendered as a name. So they're specifying it's something strange that's going on there.
Okay, so it's a bold, underlined, there's something significant. Good stuff.
Brilliant. Thank you, Alan. Someone else also asked, and there's a couple of people asking similar kind of question. How do you know that the angel of the Lord is a word for God? Someone else writes, they've often wondered if the angel of the Lord in Exodus 3 verse 2 is Jesus. So just a comment on that.
I think in this context, I'm saying that because it says the angel of the Lord appeared to him in verse 2, and then verse 4, when the Lord saw he'd gone over to look, that's Moses, God called to him from within the bush. So just in the initial context there, the way it's described makes it clear that that angel angel of the Lord is God. It's a slightly kind of mysterious expression, but it does crop up elsewhere in the Old Testament in books like, I think, Joshua and Daniel. There's this angel, and it's often kind of put on par with God. You can come to talk to me more about that later if you want to.
Okay, thank you. Final question. One of application, also good to kind of kick around in small groups, is what does it mean to lean on Jesus?
It's a good question. I think it means to listen to someone when they speak, to trust what they're saying, and to show trust by obeying. So if I just give you a really concrete example, let's say you're learning to abseil, you're terrified, you're sort of on the rope, the instructor's there, and you're just kind of panicking. The instructor is saying, look at me. I want you to straighten your legs and lean out. Don't look down, don't look up, look at me. Now, what does it mean to kind of like lean on that instructor, to trust them? Okay, he's told me to look at him, I'm going to look. I need to listen. I'm going to show I'm listening. I'm going to show I'm trusting him by leaning back. So that's just a little example. So I take that means in the Christian life, as Jesus speaks to us in his word about who he is, we're listening. We're trusting that's true. We're not looking elsewhere for who he is. When he tells us how he wants us to live and love others, I take it we're trusting, we're listening. And we're showing we trust by actually doing it. So it's an intellectual thing, it's a hearing, it's acting, it's our emotions. We are listening, we are choosing to trust, and we're choosing to act on his words.
living our lives for Jesus. Thank you.